Well, we have the latest episode in the ongoing saga of anti-Asian violence being committed across America. Mohammed Anwar is the latest victim in this epidemic in which Americans are going around and murdering these poor Asian immigrants or people of Asian descent, presumably because they blame them for the China virus. These criminals, these murderers, are all obviously being radicalized by stuff that Donald Trump said like 9 months ago. Or at least that's what I thought. That was my first instinct. I thought, gee, when I heard that old Mohammed Anwar was killed, I said, those Trump supporters. They had to go and they had to gun down with their AR. They had to get their AR-15s and just go down and gun down this poor Pakistani immigrant who was just trying to make a living for his family. 65 years old, and he was driving for Uber Eats specifically. But he was an elderly Uber driver, and he was murdered by two Americans. Although, much to my surprise, when I watched the video, which you can find on Twitter, and in all seriousness, it's really, really hard to watch. It was pretty disturbing, although I'm someone who is not a fan of violent movies, so maybe I have a lower tolerance for this sort of thing than the average person. But it's not fun to watch someone lose their life, especially when the caption says, "Hey, here's a video of Mohammed Anwar being murdered," and then you watch it, he's alive, and by the end of the video, he's not alive. It's not a fun thing to watch, and something that I noticed in that video was that, oddly enough, I didn't see any straight white males with AR-15s. What I saw were two black girls trying to steal Mohammed Anwar's car, and him desperately trying to get them out of it, and telling the bystander who is videoing in portrait mode for some reason. Not that I want to get off on a tangent about people filming in portrait mode, but never do that, please. But anyway, he's saying to the camera guy, "This is my car. They're trying to take my car." And you hear the engine revving, which is pretty scary noise when there's all that chaos going on. And then all of a sudden, I guess she was able to pop it into gear, because as we learn later, I don't think that this girl had ever driven a car. She pops it into gear, and the car flies away with poor Mr. Anwar still attached. And they just, they go off into the sunset, and you can't see them, and then you hear a crash somewhere off screen. And what it looks like is the carjackers were hoping just to shake him off. They could just, if they just sped away, he'd let go, and he'd go tumbling down the road behind them, and they could speed away in his gray Camry, which, I'll get to this later, but you really just had to take the guy's Camry. You needed, what are you going to do with it? You going to sell it? Oh, you're going to sell your stolen Camry on Craigslist or something? But anyway, in the process of, I guess, trying to shake him off, they rolled the car, and he was flung against a building, upside down. Hopefully he died instantly, because that wouldn't have been a fun thing to feel, because he did end up, of course, dead. He was a 65-year-old man who was thrown off of a speeding car, and so the car's on its side when you get to the end of the video, and he's on his back, totally unresponsive, and the girls are walking around outside the car, and there's of course National Guard troops on the sidewalk, because DC is a police state. They've got soldiers on every corner, I guess, except on the corner in which they decided to carjack poor Mr. Anwar. The irony of the police state is that they couldn't protect him, but I guess they're on guard, waiting for these Trump supporters to come out from somewhere to attack some Asians or some poor innocent congressman. I guess these soldiers were so hyper-focused on their mission to protect D.C. from an invading Trumpist army that they neglected to pay attention to their own murderous D.C. citizens. And so these girls are walking around totally, kind of, they're shaken up because they just rolled a car, but they don't at all seem concerned. They never even look at the guy that they just killed. And one of them goes, the soldier's like, wait, back up. You can't, the car might explode because, they could have a gas leak after you roll a car, and it's a gasoline car, so, it's kind of a problem. It's kind of one of the reasons why I'm a fan of diesel. Diesel doesn't explode on you, but anyway, that's just not a topic for today. So the soldier's telling her, no, you gotta back up, and she's like, no, you don't understand. My phone's still in there. Not like, no, there's still a person in there. No, my dog's in there. No, my phone is in there. She's saying, and she's whining about, as there's the man that she just killed, standing on the ground right next to her. Totally unconcerned, because she wants to get her phone before she runs away. And so here I am 6 minutes in just explaining the situation, but there is so much to unpack here. Obviously, this is sickening. I'm not somebody who says that lightly. I don't say that a lot. I mean, there are a few things that I thought were that upset me. One of them was the what's his name a few years ago in New York City. Was it Eric Brown, the guy who was selling the cigarettes, and the cops grabbed him and he had a heart attack and died? I mean, that was sad to me. But at least that was clearly an accident. I mean, he was overweight, and they grabbed him and he had a heart attack. But as I said, that stupid cigarette law shouldn't have been in place anyway. It's friggin' arresting somebody for selling untaxed cigarettes. It's so murder on the state's part, but it wasn't like you had the malice of the cop going in there and just wantonly doing something that was going to result in the guy's death. The Floyd thing, when that original video came out, that bothered me, but not as much. The only thing that kind of bothered me with that was sort of the expression on Chauvin's face in that one screenshot that everybody took where he looks really smug. But even there, it's not clear that, he's got his knee on his neck. That's not normally something that you do to try and kill somebody. But if you're trying to steal somebody's car, and they don't let go, and you drive away, and you try and shake them off, and you do shake them off, and you fling them into a building, you're trying to kill somebody, okay? And that's not fun to watch somebody commit an act of murder. Because that's not a gray area, despite what CNN's headlines might say. CNN, when they tweeted out this story, they said, these two girls, carjacked this elderly man, and it resulted in an accident that killed him. No, it's not an accident when you're trying to steal somebody's car, and they don't get out, and so you drive away, and you kill them. That's not an accident. What that is a total disregard for human life. It is inhumanity on the part of the person committing that act. I don't even know how someone's mind works like that. I mean, first of all, it's hard for me to wrap my head around just taking somebody's car, especially when it's just an Uber driver with a Camry. I mean, what are you gonna do with it? Take it to a chop shop or something? What are they gonna give you? $1,000? I mean, what can chop shops even do? I mean, cars, car parts are not built like they used to be. I mean, what can you do? Try and strip out all the copper wiring, sell it for scrap, crush it down. That's about all I can think of that you would do with a car these days. I mean, it's mostly plastic and computer chips and things. I mean, is there really a secondary market for those chips that are used out of a car? They might not even all work well. But then you add in the fact that the guy's right there. That if you drive away, you're going to be dragging him behind you. You want to drag an elderly man, an old man, behind his car that you're trying to steal, in the hopes that he'll let go, I guess, and then you can have the car. And then he's all completely scraped up, scarred for life, hopefully. And that alone could kill him, just dragging him behind the car with him hanging on. Even if he lets go pretty quick, he could break a lot of bones, because he's an old man. I mean, there are people who slip and fall in the shower and die, break a hip or something. You speed away in the car when he's hanging on. Again, let's go immediately. Just the falling down onto the pavement part could kill him. And these girls did not give a damn. Now, here's the worst part. I've been saving this. So yes, it is important to point out, as I said before, these were black girls, and I don't care that they were girls. The important part here, of course, is their skin color, because what we've been told about this crisis of anti-Asian hate crimes is that it's all these, white male Trump supporters coming out and trying to slaughter these Asian people because Trump supporters are so scared of the China virus, don't you know? That's why, when you go out and you see somebody, they're all masked up and they're wearing a gas mask and they're wearing gloves and they don't want anybody to get within 6 feet of them, that's a Trump supporter. Of course, in reality, once the media started bringing up this statistic about, supposed hate crimes against Asians, we have the statistics, and it's mostly black people committing them. Because I guess that's who lives in close proximity to each other. These are Asian people living in cities that are being affected by this. A lot of black people live in cities, kind of makes sense. And so, as far as media narrative stuff goes, there's that part of it. There's that disclaimer for the video. But what really, really bothers me the most is their ages. 15 and 13. How do you get a 15 and a 13-year-old girl, both of whom are so broken down and so antisocial, is the only way I can describe it, so sociopathic, that they could commit an act like this? I understand it a little more when you get to somebody who's a bit older, who's jaded, who's, who hates the world, who feels like, everything's against them, and they're just, they'll do anything. Maybe they're a drug addict, they need money, feed their addiction. They think that the whole world's against them, so they don't care about other people. They think everybody's out to get them. But how do you get that way at 13 years old? What sort of horrible background would these girls have to have? How do we have such a sick society that, there's so many people like this floating around that there happen to be two friends who are both this screwed up at such a young age? And I guess what's probably more likely, it's not that there was a malice in their heart, it's not that they, hated this guy or thought that he was out to get them, but it was the indifference. And that's what really seemed to strike me, because it was when she went back to the phone. It's not like she was mad, like, yeah, you stay dead. She wasn't, taunting. She was just completely, she did not register in her head that there was a dead person there in the way that it would in a normal, healthy, well-adjusted human being. Whether you were happy or sad about what you had done, you would have some reaction to it. These girls had zero reaction to it. And so that's why I used the term earlier, antisocial or unsocialized. It is, there wasn't much humanity in them. It was kind of like, I guess, if they were raised in a vacuum. Of course, had little to no parenting. They were not taught what it means to be a human being. And those kinds of people, I think, are the most dangerous to have around in society, because you never know how they're going to act, because their motivations, their way of thinking is just so completely disconnected from any normal person. I mean, in these girls' cases, it's not like what I was saying earlier. When someone weighs the costs and the benefits, and it just, of committing a horrible act like this, and they just say, you know what, the benefits outweigh the costs. I want the money, or I need to buy drugs, or I hate the world, or something like that. They're still looking at it in terms of, okay, I'm committing this act, but then again, how can I justify that? These girls in their heads, I don't think, and again, maybe I'm going overboard trying to psychoanalyze this, but to me, this video had a lot of depth to it. And I don't know how you watch something like this and not try and think about something like this to rationalize it in your head, just so that it's not so, because that pit you feel in your stomach when you watch something horrible like this, it's the confusion. It's not knowing. It doesn't make sense. That's what's bothersome about something like this. And so I think when these girls went and said, you know what, hey, let's carjack some old man, I don't think they thought of it in terms of costs and benefits or positives and negatives. I don't think that they saw any negative to it at all. It could have just been that they were just bored. That could have been enough justification, because when to them, they don't think of themselves doing anything wrong. They don't see anything, they don't see any problem with the actions that they're about to take. You don't need much motivation to do that. It's just like getting up and getting a drink out of the fridge. what's wrong with getting out a drink out of the fridge? There's nothing wrong with that morally. And how do you benefit from that? Well, it quenches your thirst. So it seems like a no-brainer. Okay, yeah, get up, get a glass of water. And I think that's probably how these girls came to this decision. Oh, but this was definitely premeditated, by the way, because something I forgot is that they tased him first. So they brought a taser. They brought some kind of weapon to try and commit this act. It's not just like they were walking down the street and spur of the moment. Maybe the guy was, maybe he took some food into a restaurant or something like that, or up to an apartment and left his car running. They're like, ooh, let's take his car. And, he came down and saw them in it. No, I mean, they had a weapon. They tased him, from what I'm hearing. So this was this is about as deliberate of a carjacking as you can get. Premeditated, certainly, if they're bringing a weapon. Now, I don't like to play the double standard game, but I do think that it is worth exploring, because I think it is interesting in this case how the situation would have, how the reaction in the country would have been different had this been, two white teenagers doing the same thing to a black old man. Obviously, there would have been the worst riots yet, because if you look at this objectively, I mean, I think that this was if you compare this to the George Floyd video, this isn't even close. And at least in the case of George Floyd, there was something he did to begin with. Whether you think that was that the response to that was proper or not, he did something to bring that on. It's not like he was just walking down the street and they threw him down. Although I guess that's how people look at it. But I mean, this old man literally did nothing that remotely that would cause any suspicion. He was just doing his job. He wasn't paying people in counterfeit bills. He wasn't, he wasn't high. He didn't have drugs in his car. He was just trying to do his job, and he ended up dead. And so, do I think the Asian American community is going to riot in cities across America and burn down black-owned businesses in revenge for the death of Mohammed Anwar? No, that's not going to happen. Asian people don't do that. There's also not enough of them. But, of course, if this was, if you change the colors a little bit, make it black old man, two white teenagers, there you go. I mean, then you'll have the media talking about the mental health crisis in America and say how white people are mentally ill, and how white people, probably need to all go to some kind of re-education camp because this is a systemic thing. White people don't value human life. We see it time and time again. I mean, I can write this stuff myself. So, it's really sad. It was hard to watch, but I don't think that this is something that is going to be a big story for long. I mean, yeah, I guess you have your Twitter conservatives trying to blow it up yesterday and talk about it a lot because they're like, oh, looky here, you got two black girls murder an Asian man. But it's, that's not going to be enough. Because there's nothing to be gained from this for anybody. This is not going to lead to riots. So I guess that's where I'll end it for today. Hopefully Mohammed Anwar can rest in peace.